We're checking in on the Minnesota football scene. The Gophers are 0-3 in the Big Ten after winning 3 non-conference games. They take on Illinois at home coming up this week. We've got Ryan Burns on the line. You can tell the insight that he has on Minnesota football. You can catch Ryan on Gopher Illustrated with the best in Minnesota football coverage. PJ Fleck comes in. This is already a program that's going to bowl games, winning bowl games, typically finishing anywhere from 8-5 after the bowl game to 9-4 last season. That's been a pretty consistent record for Minnesota, aside from a couple aberrations over the last 5 to 8 years. PJ Fleck comes in with all this hype, and for people that know football, this may not be the case, but for the fringe fan or the people with large expectations, knowing what he accomplished at Western Michigan, I've got to think that the start here in the Big Ten is quite a disappointment, and people maybe have unrealistic expectations because the bottom line is the win total.
It is, and for those coming into this season, whether it was PJ Fleck, whether it was Tracy Claeys, the expectation was not going to be 9 wins like the 2016 team was. There was far too much changing, far too much specifically at the quarterback position and in the secondary, and you're seeing both of those issues, which I thought were major things to keep an eye on coming into 2017. You're seeing them being exploited right now with Connor Rhoda not exactly being a great fit for this offense. You're seeing there was a reason Connor Rhoda never surpassed Mitch Leidner for 3-4 years as the backup. And I can tell you a Gopher fan base that didn't really think Mitch Leidner was a great quarterback. Well, folks, now you're seeing why Connor Rhoda really never passed him on the depth chart. You saw 7 guys from the 2016 team in the secondary either graduate or be expelled, including basically your entire starting secondary and key depth players. And now you're seeing injuries ravage a secondary and a quarterback that, again, we're halfway through the season here for Minnesota, and we're still talking about who's going to be the starting quarterback. I've always thought if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. So here's to hoping Demi Croft takes his opportunity, his second chance here in 2017, and runs with it. But this is just a team that has very little depth. You're looking at a right tackle last week in Sam Schluter, who PJ Fleck even acknowledged it after the press conference. He's a redshirt freshman. He probably shouldn't be playing right now. But Minnesota's right tackle, Nick Conley, is out for the foreseeable future from an injury he sustained against Purdue. You look at Vincent Calhoun, a starting right guard that went down. He was out for the remainder of the game. Minnesota doesn't have a lot of bodies on the offensive line to begin with, and now their depth is being tested there. Your starting 2 wide receivers are out. I'm not making excuses for a team that should be probably 5-1 right now, because I think they should have won the Maryland game. I think they probably should have won the Purdue game. They were either tied or winning in both games within 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They almost completed a comeback against Michigan State. I mean, this is a team that is competitive. But again, thinking that this team should be winning 8, 9, 10 games like they've won 8+ games 2 out of the last 3 seasons. But looking at the roster, especially with where they are injury-wise, they're not nearly deep enough to be winning that amount of games. Now, do I think that 6 wins is still reasonable? I think so. If Minnesota can continue to get good quarterback play like they saw in the fourth quarter, I think they should win against Illinois this weekend. A Cornhusker team that has been really falling off the cliff here of late has to come to Minnesota in November, and who knows who will be the coach there or if this Nebraska team has quit overall. And I still think Northwestern at Evanston is a very winnable game for Minnesota as well. So a bowl game is still, I think, the expectation for Minnesota. But anybody who came into this season expecting 8 or 9 wins like 2 out of the last 3 seasons, you clearly weren't on Gopher Illustrated or just listening to anybody in the Gopher media, because none of us really thought that was going to be the case with the amount of depth issues and the amount of things that Minnesota had to overcome for that to happen.
Yeah, certainly in addition to the 3 games that you mentioned that are winnable, very much toss-up games, you would think. I think the Nebraska situation is very much, as you outlined, they're a pretty talented team, but it's going to factor into the psyche as to where they land and how they're playing at that juncture of the season. The other 3 games, of course, are Iowa, Michigan, and Wisconsin, 3 of the better teams in the Big Ten, and possibly 2 of the better teams in the nation, talking Wolverines and Badgers. So those will be difficult gets for Minnesota. So it's bowl eligibility, but it's a narrow path for Minnesota.